come to order. Let me take care of some housekeeping matters here before we start. We've got two bills on the calendar in here today. I want to make some subcommittee assignments. House Bill 517, Representative Tumlin will be assigned to subcommittee number 2. Number 2 is the Mumford subcommittee. House Bill 556, Representative Benton to subcommittee 2. House Bill 560, Chairman Day to subcommittee 1. House Bill 564, Representative Dollar, subcommittee 1. House Bill 571, Representative Stevenson to subcommittee 2. House Bill 578, that's my bill, to subcommittee 1. House Bill 586, that's also the chair's bill, subcommittee 1. H.R. 413 by Representative Bearden to subcommittee 1, and H.R. 352 by Representative Benfield to subcommittee 2. And then two changes to sort of, I'm trying to equalize the workload between those two. I'm taking House Bill 395 by Representative Shaw, and moving that one from subcommittee 1 to subcommittee 2, and I'm moving House Bill 197 by Representative Fleming from subcommittee 2 and putting it in subcommittee 1. Any questions, members of the committee, about those assignments? We will be meeting tomorrow at 3 or 3:30? 3. Full committee will meet tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. in room 506 across the street. At that time, and Diane will get out a written calendar, but just for your information, the following bills will be on there: House Bill 167, House Bill 414, House Bill 419, House Bill 226, House Bill 308, House Bill 255, House Bill 287, House Bill 314, and provided that it is approved, because Chairman Knox intends to reconvene his subcommittee immediately upon adjournment of the full committee, and if House Bill 394 is approved, it will be on that calendar also. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. 506. And I will also have an announcement at the end of this meeting, Representative Setzler, only because I didn't bring my sheet in here with me, on House Bill 276. So please help me remember to do that. Any questions? Okay, we have back on the calendar today a bill that has been with us once before. Chairman Stevens, who tells me that it might take a little less time than the other bill.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize Chairman Stevens. This is on House Bill 286, and you should have a new sub in your committee folder. And then we're working off LC 33 1976S.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
It is.
Chairman Stevens.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this should not take a long time. We've already talked about this bill. This is our annual drug update bill. On Section 3, we left a drug inadvertently out. Whenever we remove Section 6, all we're doing here is adding the drug back in there.
This bill came through Representative Mumford's subcommittee. Got into rules, I think, too.
And I requested it come back to the committee.
Okay. Questions from the committee for Representative Stevens? questions from the committee?
Levonorgestrel. Oh.
Representative Lunsford, you're recognized.
I'd like to make a motion to do pass on House Bill 286.
Okay, we have a motion that House Bill
286.
get the sheet. What number, Ellie? 286. Be given a do pass recommendation by committee sub. And we have, is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your right hands. Any opposition? Let the same sign. It passes unanimously, and it's on its way back to the Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Stevens. Ask Chairman Mills to come around. House Bill 147. Let me remind the committee of where we are on this bill. This was a bill that in much in its same form came through this committee last year. We spent many hours discussing it. It's back before us now. We had 2 meetings devoted to testimony from both proponents and opponents of the bill. Many people had signed up at the first meeting. We took some of those that day. We had a good discussion with the author at that time, who spent a good hour and a half, I guess, or more with us answering questions. The remaining people on the sign-up sheet who had not testified were proponents of the bill. I have talked with many of those people, including the organizations that they're affiliated with, and it is my understanding that those people choose or no longer wish to testify. Is that correct, Mr. Harris? Okay. All right. With that in mind, Chairman, I understand, Chairman Mills, you have brought to us a substitute today.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Then let's begin by having you take us through the substitute that you have to House Bill 147. And upon conclusion of that, we will ask you to expose yourself one more time to questions from the committee. And then we'll see what the pleasure of the committee might be. And I understand we're working off LC 292785 ERS. Is that correct?
292785 ERS.
Right.
That's correct.
Chairman Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you this substitute. I want to thank you for our first discussion that we had in regards to this, and a lot of good comments and suggestions were made along the way. And after looking at this whole ultrasound issue, I've come with a substitute today that I hope will answer a lot of the questions that were previously addressed by several members of this committee. The first one being is that right off the bat, you'll notice in the opening paragraph of the bill that it simply, we're changing the language to say that in this bill that an ultrasound can be offered. It's not forced to be offered. It's not mandated to be offered. And that's the biggest change in the bill, that if an ultrasound is offered, then there must be offered a viewing of the ultrasound, if an ultrasound is offered. On page 2 of the bill, I would like to at least suggest, at the request of some of our physicians, on line 22, there seemed to be some concern about the phrase in this substitute, which was actually in the original bill, and I certainly would be willing to amend that and strike this language. But if the committee is agreeable, I'd like to, after the word physician on line 22, the first word physician, strike or by a referring physician. I'm asking that if we could just strike that, or by a referring physician, right after the first word physician on line 22. And to make that sentence flow better, line 22, the first comma we probably ought to strike and just add the word or, insert the word or, since. So it would read, an abortion or by a qualified agent of a referring physician, comma, at least 24 hours before the abortion. And that's how the correct, and again, that's simply a request of doctors, and I don't have a problem with that. On page 3 of the bill, of course, page 2 is simple current law. It talks about the Woman's Right to Know Act and things that, under current law, must be shared with a woman when she comes in for an abortion. And then on page 3 of the bill, the underlined portion there, you can see the language that we've inserted. This hasn't changed from what we originally presented, but it just says that we have to provide or be told how they can obtain a list of healthcare providers, facilities, and clinics that offer to perform ultrasounds free of charge. And again, those can be arranged geographically. That hasn't changed. And to me, the major crux is what I said right at the beginning. This is not mandating the ultrasound. This language says if one is done, then one must be offered to the patient. And that brings me to the bottom of page 3. I'd like to again ask the committee, when we redrew the sub, I was somewhat concerned to call this an obstetric ultrasound, and I would prefer that we just keep it a general ultrasound and strike the word obstetric on line 33, page 3.
Chairman Knox.
What was the change there again?
On page 3, line 33, just strike the word obstetric. And it basically would just say, again, for cases in which an ultrasound is performed prior to conducting an abortion or pre-abortion screen, the following must be offered. And when an ultrasound is done, here's the crux of the change, is that the woman, on line 35, the woman shall, at the conclusion of the ultrasound, be offered the opportunity to view the fetal image or hear the fetal heartbeat. And then on page 4, line 5, and I failed to mention, I took out the criminal penalties. There are no criminal penalties in here. Those have been removed. You still have the state board, which will oversee, and if a complaint is brought against a physician, then they can take it up. But there are no criminal penalties, and that's been taken out. On line 5, on page 4, this is new. The new language on page 4, line 5, just simply says that after a woman has had the opportunity to view the fetal image and hear the fetal heartbeat, the woman shall be offered 15 minutes of private reflection to consider the nature and consequences of the potential abortion. And at the conclusion of these actions, prior to the abortion, the female certifies in writing that she was provided the opportunities described in subparagraphs A and B of this paragraph, and whether or not she elected to view the sonogram, whether or not she elected to listen to the fetal heartbeat, and whether or not she engaged in the 15 minutes of private reflection. And that, everything else in the bill is the same. I think the major portion is that we're not requiring an ultrasound. It is optional. If an ultrasound is performed, then the viewing must be offered to the patient. And I would say to you, I am aware of no medical procedure that the test results are withheld from the patient at any time after being conducted if the patient expresses a desire to view those. And that's simply what I'm attempting to do here. I know that there's, in the past we had the discussion about, well, rape and incest came up. And again, I would say to the members of this committee, it is my opinion that that is the most disingenuous argument, simply because they already have the option to perform the ultrasound going in. We're not mandating that. So someone could come in and say, well, I don't want an ultrasound. And I would ask the members of the committee to not support any amendment which would include the language of rape and incest, because I think it's already included here by simply saying that the ultrasound does not have to be performed, but if they do, they have to offer it to the patient. And Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to keep my comments brief. I do want to share with the committee, this is a stack of 5,983 signatures of people in Georgia that are in agreement with the concept that if an ultrasound is performed, then a woman should have the right to view that ultrasound.
Thank you, Chairman Mills. Questions from the committee for the author, Representative Levitas.
Let me take this chronologically. What's the reason for getting rid of the referring physician? I know you said doctors requested it, but as I read that provision, all it seems to say is that if a referring physician provides that information, it's also satisfied. But it doesn't mandate that they perform anything, so I'm not sure why we would remove, if this bill passes, the ability of a referring physician to provide that information. Is there a reason?
That's a good question. I'd really like, if I could, defer to somebody else. This came at the request of the physicians. I was just trying to honor that. I didn't see it as a crucial matter in this bill, so
was it Medical Association of Georgia that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know.
I would be curious to know that. Mr. Chairman, may I ask just a couple more questions? Sure. I understand that you're saying you're not requiring the ultrasound to be done, but from the last hearing, we all know that that's generally the standard of practice. So for all intents and purposes, you are requiring, as I read this provision, the woman to view it. If one's being shown, she has to go through all the steps we've already talked about. So if your intention is to allow the woman to view it if it's being done, why not word it in a way that makes it, if the woman requests it, it shall be shown, rather than she has to have she shall be given the opportunity, and then has to expressly decline or accept all these things in writing. I mean, as I read it, that's essentially the same. And my related to that question is, I would assume you would agree that before a woman walks into an abortion clinic, she spent some time thinking about the nature and consequences of what she's about to do. And so why do we need an extra 15 minutes? What purpose does that serve, either medically or in terms of information?
Good questions. I'm certainly flexible on the 15 minutes. I do think a pause of a time to reflect, so that someone couldn't just say, okay, we've done the ultrasound now, but let's move on. We got this out of the way. That's basically what it's there. So, I'm willing to work with you on that, just as I was on not mandating the ultrasound in the first place. When a bone is broken and you go in for an X-ray, I've never had a physician say to me, "We can't see the X-ray of your bone." I've done it. It's broke. It's standard care practice, and as a matter of fact, some of the folks who represented, who were in opposition to my bill, testified to this committee that ultrasounds were not standard practice of care in the first trimester. Do you remember
Yes,
that being made?
Right, and I guess my question to you is whether under the way it's written, if they're not done, they don't have to show it to them. My question is really if you want to leave this up to the benefit of the woman's right to know. If she requests it, and the example you gave is a perfect one. If I go into a doctor's office and I ask to see my X-ray, my doctor will say, "Here's your X-ray." Where what is the specific evidence that we have that abortion clinics are not honoring that? In other words, if the woman wanted to see the sonogram that was taken, the doctors are routinely saying, no, you can't see it. Because that would, if that's the case, this might be addressing an ill or a problem. But this, to me, looks like a solution in search of a problem, unless there's evidence out there showing that abortion clinics are routinely refusing the requests of females to see the sonograms. What I'm asking you, is there any data to back that up? I know we had an anecdote of one individual that said that was her experience, but I'm looking for something. If we're going to pass a general application law for something that goes into a little more broad-based solution to a broad-based problem that's out there. I'm just asking if there's any data out there.
Well, as you all know, this would be a very difficult data to find. That's almost like somebody agreeing to practicing medicine below the standard level of care. And we did have a person who came at one of our last hearings to testify, and I introduced them to you specifically afterward because you had that question, and you said, you know, this looks like a problem in search of an answer, and I wanted you to know that it is out there and it is happening. And clearly, someone who performs an abortion and runs an abortion clinic, clearly their goal is to perform abortions. They've made that decision. So, in fairness to the patient, I think that we have a responsibility to make sure that the patient is fully informed before she makes that decision. And I can't for the life of me imagine why anyone would want to make the case for withholding medical test results from a patient before they make such a critical decision.
And I'm, so that we're very clear, that is not the case that I'm making. What I'm making the case for is not requiring a woman who's already going through a very difficult decision to have to decline in writing and be offered the opportunity to see a fetal heartbeat, the opportunity to see a sonogram, and have 15 minutes of private reflection. That's very different. The surgeon is in the business of performing surgeries, and I don't see any bills out there mandating that every surgeon require a broken bone x-ray or a gallbladder or a cancer fever shown to the patient. So again, if what we're after, and there's evidence out there that there's a real problem, but my concern is, what this seems to me is we're adding layers on it to make that already difficult decision more difficult for the purposes of making it more difficult, rather than a true right to know. And if it's a real right to know, I mean, 15 minutes, I think we've agreed that there's not much medical purpose behind that. But again, we're allowing them to view that. That's fine. If they request it, they'll have the opportunity. The doctor shall provide that, as opposed to the reverse of saying you must actively decline viewing, you must actively decline listening to the heartbeat, you must actively decline that 15 minutes of reflection. That's where I would draw the distinction, because I don't agree with withholding anything from anybody.
And may I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I guess my statement to that would be is, you know, what kind of physician would you want to go to who wouldn't offer you that viewing? I mean, I would stay away from that type of physician personally, and I think that we have a responsibility as lawmakers in this particular situation where we know they're in the business of performing abortions, and we keep going back to why this standard level of care. The bottom line, hard truth is, a lot of these clinics are operating below the standard level of care, and that's just the hard truth.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time. Mr. Chairman, thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
The next hand I think I saw was that of Chairman Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Mills, I'm curious as to where in the bill we find that there's any assurance, even after we've made these changes, that the woman will actually have an opportunity to see the ultrasound as it's being used. Now, the only thing that I know about it is when folks go in for their check on their pregnancy and they do the ultrasound, and the parents go together and they do that little wand deal, and they show the picture of the baby, and everybody gets all excited and trying to find out if it's a boy or a girl or something like that. You know, there doesn't seem to be a problem about being able to see that ultrasound picture in that case, does it?
There's not, and we know that in some abortion clinics, the way it is practiced in some clinics is they will perform the ultrasound, and they will have the monitor either covered up or in an adjacent room, so that the patient cannot see the monitor while the ultrasound is being done. Thus, the whole crux for the bill.
I went in to have a cardiology testing done, heart testing done. Oh, it's been a while ago, and they had me do an echocardiogram, which I think is something like an ultrasound. And they had the television monitor right in front of my face, so I could see my heart working. You know, you can see the valves working, you see the blood going through, you know, the whole 9 yards. I have a big time picture with a cross section of it. You can see the inside of the heart with this device. And, you know, it was like on a post right there where you are so that you can see it. You know, you didn't have to ask for it. You know, there was no question about whether you were going to see it or not. You know, and clearly they wanted me to see it based on where it was positioned. And then not too long after that, I went to the dentist, and when I was sitting in the dentist chair, there was a monitor right in front of my face, and they had already taken pictures of what they were going to do and what they needed to do and so on and so forth, and they were showing me the pictures of my teeth, and that was right in front of me. There wasn't any question that I was not going to see that. You know, I didn't have to ask for it. You know, I didn't have to fill out any forms or anything else. They wanted me to see what they were going to do. The doctor wanted to let me know what was going to happen, and you know, that sort of thing. And so I'm curious as to why we're having a debate about this at all. Why would, in something as serious as an abortion, why wouldn't the doctor want the person involved to see what it is that we're going to do? Not that it's not a difficult decision. I understand it's a difficult decision. But the most difficult thing is the result. That's the real difficulty, the result. So why wouldn't we want a person to be sure that the person gets to see that? Why wouldn't that monitor be right there for them to see that something as important as this? It's a whole lot less important than an echocardiogram, as far as I'm concerned. A lot less important than, you know, a dental checkup. So what's the difference? I don't get it. I mean, I've been around for a while, and I really don't get the problem with this. You understand my question?
I do.
Why wouldn't they want us to see that?
I'm in agreement with you, Representative Knox. I don't know why. Unless they're trying to keep something from the patient. I don't know.
Representative Sitzler and Chairman Cooper.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to answer Representative Knox's question. I think, you know, as you look at the prospect of this very serious business of conducting abortions, I think I'm just concerned there's a real conflict of interest. I mean, if the ultrasound were turned towards the woman, again, I've got 4 kids at home, and I've never been part of seeing an ultrasound, and I've seen probably in excess of 15 or 20 where the ultrasound wasn't turned to the woman, to my wife, to view it as it was being performed. Now, in the case of an obstetrics practice that's delivering babies, there's an expectation that the mom see it because they want the mom to sort of embrace the idea that she's having a baby, to encourage her to take care of the child, and really have a vision of what's happening inside of her. Because when a woman's able to embrace what's happening inside of her, that she's got a member of the human community living within her that's dependent on her physically, then that's very important to her, taking care of the child and caring and being a good mom in terms of the pregnancy. I would submit in the context of an abortion, there's a direct opposite financial incentive, that if the woman sees that she has a member of the human community inside of her and what's going on, that there's a significant incentive for the woman to say, wait a minute, I'm a 18-year-old girl, I'm a 17-year-old girl, I'm a 22-year-old woman. I've never seen an ultrasound before, and this ain't what I thought I was doing. And rather than encouraging the mom to carry through with the medical procedure, there's a profound incentive then for her to terminate the procedure and the act not being performed. I think there's a tremendous conflict of interest, and I think to suggest that a woman ought to have the presence of mind to say, oh, by the way, doctor, you know, the ultrasound may be in the next room, but let me get up and go look at it. I can't imagine us doing that, rather than a doctor saying, you know, we have an ultrasound image available to you in the next room. Would you like to go see it? To suggest that that's not a reasonable thing to require, recognizing that abortion clinic themselves have a tremendous financial incentive to not have the woman see the image in the deal. I think the financial conflict there is reason enough. I mean, there are other reasons, not the least of which many women enter abortion not really knowing the facts, what's happening inside of them. So I would just ask the committee to consider that, and I would applaud Chairman Mills in trying to work with the language he's worked with and that's evolved through this process.
Chairman Cook.
I have several questions about the bills, but before I ask those questions, I'd like to take you back to one of the last nights of the session last year. And if you remember, this bill was stuck in this committee. Wasn't moving, remember? Or it
That
didn't
was a
seem to
long
be
time
moving.
ago.
Okay.
I'm trying to be as honest as I can. I do remember
Okay,
it
do
did
you
not pop
remember
out of this
that-
committee.
That I did change the bill and then it passed out of this committee and went to rules?
I do remember you offering some amendments.
And it was, and then it was those amendments and that substitution that passed out that got the bill to rules. Okay, so I'm just laying that ground because some in the community have said that I, killed the bill, so I just wanted to make it in public record that it was because of my action last time that the bill moved out of this committee in the form that I did it. And so I was not trying to kill the sonogram bill. And I am once again not trying to kill the sonogram bill, but I have some serious questions about the way it's written. Right? So, with
Okay.
all due respect. First of all, on page 2, and this will relate to later on, I had some on line 24 through 28. Talking about the medical risks that are medically accurate and the medical risks associated with carrying an unborn child to term. And I'm bringing this up because I know that the Georgia Right to Life and some of the people in the anti-abortion movement think that there are different risks. We went through this on the woman's right to know, like some believe that definitely having an abortion makes women have more breast cancer, and the medical community would say that that is not substantiated. And I think that there could be some other issues like that would relate later on to any kind of action to the Board of Medicine, where there could be questions about that.
So, do you have a problem with current law? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I mean,
because that's current law.
I know it's current law, Representative Mills. I just have a problem. They were now putting the sonogram back in this code. It wasn't in this section last year. It was in another section of the law. So, this current law was not talking to the sonogram bill.
Right.
So,
I had
okay.
such a hard time getting it out of this committee last year. I thought I'd try a new section this
Okay.
year.
But
And hoping
now
that you
you're-
wouldn't offer another amendment.
But now you're. It's the only way it got out, Representative Mills, if you'll tell the truth. And I tend to think. I was going to say if you will tell the truth. Anyway, so I'm worried about how that would reflect back on the action. But anyway, okay, on page 3. On section 6. How to obtain a list of healthcare providers and facilities that do free ultrasounds. And also in the area where it says you'll do it on a geographical area, where they're being offered free. In Newsweek, and I'm sure you've seen Newsweek this time, they have a whole article on this, and I picked it up to read. And I have great concerns about the quality of the ultrasounds. And it's an article about a group up in North Carolina, I'm trying to find where I've stuck it. And they're talking about how the women that run their clinics have 2 weeks of intensive training on how to do an ultrasound. What did I do with that? Here it is. Nurse Wilson and her colleagues Denise Bagley, had 2 weeks of intensive training in limited obstetrical ultrasounds. They learned how to confirm and date a pregnancy and measure a fetus, but not how to diagnose fetal abnormality. And they were said, the medical director signs off on every report, but says, we're not giving medical care, the lady who runs the clinics. People in doctors' offices, the people who perform the ultrasounds, have a year of training, and they are certified in how to do these. And I have a real question about the clinics, because I know many of them are like this clinic in North Carolina, where they are bringing people off the street, and if you read this article, and giving them 2 weeks of an intensive course, and then they are doing the ultrasounds. And so I have a real problem with the bill with that, and what the accuracy of the ultrasounds would be when they're performed by basically an untrained person to do them. And that is of concern to me. The other concern I have is on page 4, number B. After the woman has had an opportunity to view the fetal image and hear the fetal heartbeat, the woman shall be offered 15 minutes. You know, I think that, and I asked one of the representatives from the OBGYN Society to tell me, I couldn't quite remember from my nurse's training, when you could hear the heartbeat. And, Ms. Cota said that it would be between 7 and 8 weeks. Could be later if the woman was, extremely obese, and we do have a problem with that across the state of Georgia and South and across the southern states. And so, in setting this up, and the fact that you're going to have a woman sign this, there would be a real problem, because I think that they should have been offered to hear the heartbeat when the sonogram doesn't offer that. And I'm not sure about all the machines either picking. I think it takes a really sophisticated, and I'd ask Mrs. Cota, and I may be wrong on this, not all ultrasounds are that sophisticated that they pick up a heartbeat really early. So I could see us having a problem with this. A woman would say she hadn't been offered a chance to hear the heartbeat because it was too early to hear the heartbeat, and so you're having her sign this, and then maybe she signs it and later on thinks that she was not, given the right to hear something that wasn't there, so she makes a complaint to the medical board. I think the way it reads, it reads that they have to be offered.
Well, I think your concerns are clearly addressed on page 4, line 5, the operative word being the opportunity to view or to hear. And then she's going to sign her name to that document, saying that she's had the opportunity before she moves or leaves the facility. So she's going to have to go against her own will in order to bring up any complaints. So
no, you're missing it. What I'm talking about is they might not have been able to hear the heartbeat yet on the ultrasound.
No, I understand what you're saying, Representative Cooper. I'm just saying that it doesn't say that you have to hear it. It says that the woman has to have been offered the opportunity.
But if it's not available, what I'm saying is,
then I think you can make a medical case. If it's not available to be heard at 5 weeks, then the doctor has every ground to stand on it. Not available to be heard at 5 weeks, but
it doesn't. Pardon? But it does. I just have a problem with us lining it up, because I think it's a problem. Okay, the geographical information I have a problem with, because I think that many of the clinics that do free sonograms across the state are the type of clinics where they are training people with 2 weeks of training or less, and they are not certified. That would be available, and I think that's what, it's indicating that you would want to offer. And the last thing I have a problem with is this last on page 6. I think you've written, in addition to whatever remedies are available under the common or statutory law of this state, failure to comply with the requirements of this chapter shall provide a basis for professional disciplinary actions from the composite board of medical examiners. I think that you're implying that it's an automatic disciplinary action, not up to the board to let them decide. And I would like to see that change. We had it in last year's bill. It said the Composite State Board of Medical Examiners shall be responsible for any disciplinary action related to this code section, which means they would have the right to look at the situation. Like you said, and the woman complains that she didn't hear the heartbeat. They would have the right to go back and look and see when it was done in the records, and it says that it was done at 5 weeks and there was no fetal heartbeat heard, and they could decide that it was not that there was no need for a disciplinary action. The way it's written here, it sounds like it's an automatic disciplinary action.
I think it. May I respond?
Please.
I think it clearly states on line 3, page 6, that this shall provide a basis. Basis means basis. I mean, that's not a conclusive decision at that point, but I hear what you're saying. I have agreed to take out the criminal penalties, which I've done. I have agreed to take out the mandatory ultrasound, which I've done. I don't view myself as an anti-abortion person. I view myself as a pro-birthday person. That I believe everybody has a right to a birthday. And, talking about and looking back at, there's a whole litany of questions that you brought up. Looking back at, you said there was a problem on page 2, the lines 23 through 27. Of course, that is current law, as I referred to earlier, and I would say to the members of this committee, that is probably the most stinging part of the Women's Right to Know bill that we passed several years ago, because it says it brings up the probable gestational age of an unborn child. The ACOG, which is a group of obstetricians and gynecologists, they come up with how they practice, and they state in their own standard of care manual that the most accurate ultrasound that can be done as far as telling the probable gestational age of a baby is in the first trimester, which I found to be somewhat amazing, because I would not have guessed that at all. But in their own manual, that's what they suggest. And then you mentioned about, I appreciate any time another legislator helps me. I really do. But in all honesty, Representative Cooper, your amendment last year weakened the bill very much that I started out with. And to be truthful about it and to hold it out there as if it strengthened it, at least from my perspective, it did not. It didn't strengthen it. But, that's part of what this process is all about. And, I respect your right to have amendments and input, just as I would hope you would respect mine. And just as I gave you a chance to share earlier, I would hope you would give me a chance to continue to remark to your comments. I do believe that by making an optional ultrasound,
I'm not against that.
but by making it optional, then that addresses the concerns of rape, incest, whatever. But I'm also very much aware of the fact that, honestly, members of this committee, I think we all know, I've asked myself 1,000 times, why have abortion clinics started doing ultrasounds? Clearly not because it's been mandated by the law. Clearly, I think they understand that they have to tell the probable gestational age with as much fact as they have at hand. And an ultrasound does that, and they know that, and they feel liable. And so they're covering themselves, and they're very smart to do so. And I don't blame them for that. If I was in that business, I would do it too, because I think you could be sued if you didn't do it, frankly.
Representative Mills.
Chairman Cooper.
I didn't say that the bill that came out of committee last time strengthened your bill. I said the bill was stuck in committee and not going anywhere.
So it weakened it.
I'm just saying it was a different bill that would allow it to move out of this committee. Okay? Because the other one was not going anywhere last time.
I hope you'll help me out today then, help me move this one on
I
out.
hope you'll help me out a little bit too, because I'm really concerned. I have no problem with an ultrasound to tell the gestational age, and I think I have no problem with that, and they do need to do it. What I have a problem with is what's written on page 2, and you saying that it is a basis, because I differ with you on the medical thing, because that is saying it gives them grounds, basically, for a disciplinary action. I'm having trouble with this part of the law, because we're now looking at the law we passed, and that came out of my committee, the Woman's Right to Know. Even though it had been stuck for years and years and not moved, it moved out of my committee, Representative Mills. All
Thank
right?
you. I'm glad.
And I have no problem with the medical risk, but when we start putting a possible basis for a action against a physician, if somebody says later on to this person, oh, did they tell you that by having an abortion you can have increased breast cancer? Because some people and some groups believe that. I just have a problem with how it's written on page 6. That's one of the reasons I have a problem with how that is written. Do you understand what I'm having?
I do understand.
I understand that. That's what I'm having a problem with, is that since there is some differences of opinion on that, like I just have a problem now that we're moving another procedure and something that can be reported to the board. I have a problem with that on that, and would like to see the language that was in last year's bill. I have no problem if physicians in an abortion clinic are blatantly not doing what you want them to do, getting disciplined by the medical board. I do have a problem if there's an accident or something like that. The basis. No. So I would like, if you would, the last year's language was, the composite state board of medical examiners shall be responsible for any disciplinary action related to this code section. In other words, they can be reported, but then they can decide, here again, if the doctors are blatantly not doing what it says, or I guess that somebody could forget to get something signed, Representative Mills, or the woman could say, I didn't hear the heartbeat, but they could go back and decide.
I would be open to that, Representative Cooper. I just don't want to create a huge gaping hole for someone who is intentionally violating the law to get away with it.
I don't have any problem with this, Representative Mills, but I have and I don't, like I said, if it's an abortion clinic, doctors, and they're doing it, and they're blatantly doing something, but we're having real trouble in this state getting OBGYNs to come deliver babies, normal babies, that people want, like Representative Settler's for, not so much in Cobb County, but out across this state. And any time that new young doctors and stuff hear about things that we're putting them on, where it's a basis, if they forget to get a piece of paper signed, if they're trying to do their job, then it scares them about coming here. And there are places in Georgia where women have to drive 85 miles for a radius of 85 to 100 miles to have a normal baby, because there was one OBGYN. And I'm worried about us having enough health care for normal deliveries and the children that the people of Georgia people want. And so I'm concerned when it looks like we're setting up something where it looks like we could get our doctors for doing a job, accidentally making a mistake, not getting something signed, or a woman coming back on them and saying, I didn't hear the heartbeat, and there being something.
I don't think I'd have a problem except in the language that we had in the Woman's Right to Know bill there.
And
that's not a major issue for me.
Like from last year.
That's not a major issue for me. I think this bill is going to address some of your concerns of people having to drive 80 miles. We're going to do this. We'll be able to give them a map that'll show all these different places they could go and get a free ultrasound if they want. So
I'm not worried about the ones going to get an abortion. I'm worried about delivering normal, healthy babies that people want, Representative Mills.
I'm kind of worried about them all, but I understand what you're saying.
I'm worried about them all too, but I'm worried about us having enough OBGYNs that are willing to come to this state to take care of the women of the state, and not feeling like that we're passing laws that hold the lawsuit threat over their heads when they're trying to just go about doing the best job they can possibly do.
I think we agree on that point.
Okay, so okay.
Okay. Representative Stacey Abrams, then Representative Setzler.
I just have a couple of questions. You asserted earlier, in response to Mr. Levitt's question, that often abortion clinics operate below the standard level of care. Does that accurately reflect what you said?
It does.
I guess my concern is, has the Composite Board of Medical Examiners held that an ultrasound is medically necessary? Because to me, when you state that they're operating below a standard level of care, and the standard level of care does not require an ultrasound in the first trimester, even though it may be a more accurate disposition of gestational age, it is not currently medically necessary. I'm concerned about creating the appearance that we are attempting to regulate a medical necessity when that's not what this bill attempts to do. Is that accurate?
I want to make sure I followed everything that you said.
I'll restate it. I guess my concern is that is it true or not true that this bill to me does not attempt to create a medical standard of care? That's
correct.
And to assert that this bill somehow meets, when you conflate that with the fact that you stated that they operate below a standard of care, and what this bill attempts to create is this new responsibility for an ultrasound, that to me creates the appearance that this is something that's medically necessary when it is not.
I think it can be debated over the medical necessary for it. I think that can be debated.
Okay.
I certainly would not want my wife to go forward with a pregnancy without having ultrasounds all along the way. But I understand here what you're saying. This bill is not about standard of care. It is about fully disclosing all the facts to the patient before a very important decision is made.
Okay. Then that leads to my next point. My concern here is that this is a medically unnecessary test, according to the Composite Board of Medical Examiners. It is an invasive test that 89% of the women who receive abortions in the state of Georgia would have to undergo. And it's an invasive test which requires the insertion. It's not the television version of the ultrasound where you have a wand that's waved over the belly of the mother. It is an invasive procedure because the only way to get the accuracy, to your point, there's higher accuracy in the ultrasound in the first trimester because instead of it being a wand waved over the belly of the female, it is a wand that's actually inserted into a woman, and that is why they're able to get more accurate data. I think it's important, and what causes me the most concern is that in a time of great trauma, in a time where I find it almost unbelievable that any woman has not considered the implications of this decision, certainly maybe not to the level that others may wish her to consider them, but to require a medically invasive procedure or to even suggest that medically invasive procedure is necessary for a woman to understand what she's deciding to do, that causes me great consternation. And so I guess my question is, if you're not requiring that the procedure be undergone, you're not requiring that medical professionals provide a medically unnecessary test, this to me seems like a wholly permissive bill, in which case, as a person who just believes you don't pass law unless you actually need to make something else happen, I fail to understand why this bill is necessary, why we need to add another law, another layer of regulation, when it doesn't achieve a purpose that's either medically necessary or that answers an issue that women actually have, which is that they're unaware of what they're asking for when they go to seek an abortion. Can you speak to that for me, please?
I can. I would say that we talked about the invasiveness of a first trimester ultrasound, and the invasiveness of that is I'd hate to put it on a scale, but I would say North Pole, South Pole, as opposed to the invasiveness of an abortion itself. So if your objection is the invasiveness of a first trimester ultrasound, and you're probably going to have a real hard time with the procedure itself. And I think that because everybody, whether you're pro-birthday or anti-birthday or whatever you want to call yourself, I think I hear people say over and over again, well, we don't like abortions. It's nobody likes an abortion. I hear that said over and over. It's a last case result, and all that is probably true for a lot of people. And with that statement being true for a lot of people, I would think that we have a responsibility to make sure that people have all the facts before they make that very tough decision.
I guess to respond to a point that you just made, I believe that my point about the invasive nature is simply that it's a medically unnecessary test, and that it seems to be it seems to add a level of or layer of torture. Essentially, because you've determined that you were willing to undergo a medically and psychically traumatic experience, which is the abortion, we are going to further augment that torment by forcing you to go a pre-invasive procedure that does not provide you with any additional information, and that simply further requires that you examine a decision that you had to have thought about for a great deal of time. But leaving that aside, my second concern is the implication that there is some financial windfall for abortion clinics and not providing ultrasounds or not providing the ability to see the ultrasound. I mean, that to me speaks to two issues. One, that we are certainly a free market economy, and if there were such great financial windfalls available in abortion clinics, we wouldn't have so few of them in Georgia, and we wouldn't have the difficulty of attracting doctors into that field. So I take exception to the idea that a medically necessary, or certainly that a medical procedure that enjoys the stigma that abortion enjoys, that is somehow operated for the doctors who do undergo and decide to become a part of that profession, that they do so for some financial windfall, and that this bill attempts to force their financial hand on stopping them from making extra money by not showing the abortion. And I would just like to have you respond to that contention that I believe I heard.
I'd be glad to. First of all, if I made that, I don't know how you heard that in what I said, and if you did, that was not the assumption that I meant to relay. What I'm trying to simply relay is that when a woman comes in and she wants to make this decision, and an abortion clinic or facility provides an ultrasound, that she has a right to view that ultrasound if an ultrasound is performed on her. And that I know of no other medical test in the medical field where test results are withheld from the patient prior to making a decision as your next step. And as you have stated so well, you said, not even necessarily. What I heard you say was that nobody likes having an abortion. It's not something that somebody wants to be proud of. And if we all agree on that point, whether you're pro-birthday or anti-birthday, if we all agree on the point that nobody likes an abortion, then this is a great measure to help people really think this process through before they make that decision. That we all agree it's not a good thing. Somebody has to do this.
My final question is this: I do agree with you that it is a difficult choice for anyone to make. It's a traumatic choice that has both physical and psychological impact that exists long after the decision is made. I believe also that it is important to recognize that very few women make this decision without having given careful thought, and to me it's a bit trivializing of the decision to say that 15 additional minutes of reflection can make a difference in the way a woman thinks about such a dramatic decision. But that notwithstanding, my last question returns to Mr. Levitas' point, which is that if this is designed to allow women, to give women the ability to engage in more information, and with an absent proof that women are being denied access to this information, it seems to me that Section C simply puts more onus on the woman and takes responsibility away from the doctor by forcing a woman to state her intentions on several levels in writing, to actually have to affirmatively deny what she sought, what she has contemplated, what she's going to have to undergo. That to me seems, unintentionally, or maybe unintentionally, but certainly unnecessarily cruel to a woman. Can you respond to why it's necessary for a woman to affirmatively make these statements as opposed to simply acknowledging a blanket waiver saying that I declined to see the sonogram? Why she would need to make all of these separate statements of fact as an affirmative statement?
Surely, because this would lead to great danger of public health if we did not provide some level of accountability. And in order to protect her privacy, she can sign off on this in privacy. If you didn't ask the patient to sign off on it, saying, hey, I agree, I was offered the ultrasound, I was offered to view it, and I'm signing that fact. If you left it open-ended and you just said the doctor, then that would put us in a situation where a doctor could never be accused of or could never be held accountable if he were taking advantage of people in the general public, and I don't think we'd want a situation like that. So thus the sign off. But again, it's all private. No, these are not public documents.
Absolutely. Well, would you be amenable then? Similar. This language strikes me as similar to the privacy language that we have now under HIPAA rules, where you're required to acknowledge that there were certain opportunities given to you to either accept or reject treatment and use of your information. Would you be amenable, instead of this delineation or enumeration of 4 affirmative statements the woman has to make, a simple waiver saying that I have declined or I have accepted, or that I've either declined or accepted the opportunities without having to affirmatively state each of these statements? Because my concern is that for each one of these statements, you're requiring a woman to take another step and another step in a very emotionally and psychologically trying time, and it again just strikes me as a cruelty that it should not be visited on any woman at any time.
We'll just have to agree to disagree, Representative Abrams, on that, because I don't see it as a cruelty at all. I see it as that she has a right to these tests, especially if they were performed on her. And if she can't sign off on it, then that would leave grounds wide open for somebody else to fictitiously say you were offered this when in reality she may have not been.
Mr. Bloom, I was going to recognize the speaker for his being on a field trip down here today, but he left, so maybe he'll come back and visit with us. Representative Setzler, I think, was next, and then Representative Levinas.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to share with the committee. I had some concerns with some of the things the committee members have shared, but again, in the spirit of dialogue, I want to just sort of embrace their concerns and maybe share another perspective. I would offer, and Representative Abrams, I appreciate the time and attention you've given this issue. With respect to the issue of financial windfalls, conflict of interest, why do we think there's a potential financial windfall here if there's only a finite number of abortion clinics in Georgia? And why do we think this extra level of care needs to be gone to make sure that women are fully informed of their decision? And I would ask you to consider other parts of the code where we require in contracts or in certain documents that certain things be stated with a certain size font. It's widely known. The idea of, in fact, it's joked about the idea of it's all in the fine print. Well, why do folks want to put things in fine print? Well, folks want to kind of disguise things in fine print because down in fine print there are these nasty little details that if they were the big fat print up on the top of the contract, things might look differently. And I would submit to you it's the same concern here, that if the reality of the life growing inside of the woman is obscured and kept away in the fine print, and not presented in a way that the woman deals with it in a very, very intentional, very clear way, then what we're doing is we're relegating the fact of the life inside the mother to just the fine print. And I would submit that we've got an obligation as we consider these things as General Assembly, particularly in the context of some of the women for whom abortions are performed are not all professional women. They've not all. They don't scour websites and read manuals and books about decisions they make. In fact, in many cases, decisions are made hastily with fear and some level of misunderstanding. What this simply is we're not allowing abortion clinics to relegate the facts of the physiological thing happening inside of a woman to the fine print. And I would assume, you as a member of the bar would support the concept of things not being shrouded in fine print but being out in the open where folks have full knowledge and disclosure. And I would submit that's really the intention of Representative Mills' bill as I see it. And I would just offer that to other members of the committee. To your concerns about the standard of care, again, I know we've all read through this bill. We talked about levels of invasiveness. I can't quote you exactly. I know there was the concept that are we forcing the woman to do certain things? There was a discussion of whether it's medically necessary. Should this even be done? Does it need to be done? Representative Mills' bill on page 3, line 33, and again, just for purposes of clarity, does nothing to require that a single ultrasound ever be performed. And I just want to, just for the sake of the committee, I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Does everyone factually agree that this bill states that under no circumstances in any way does this bill require that any additional ultrasounds be performed? Is that factually grasped by everybody in the committee? Because this bill requires that not a single additional ultrasound procedure be performed. So
I don't understand that. So
okay.
If you can explain that to me, that would be good.
Thank you, Representative Mangan. If you turn to page 3, line 33. It's subparagraph 4. It says, for all cases in which an obstetric, and we may or may not remove the word obstetric, but for all cases in which an obstetric ultrasound is performed prior to conducting an abortion or pre-abortion screen. So it's ultrasounds in the context of abortions. The woman shall, at the conclusion of the ultrasound, be offered the opportunity to view the fetal image and hear the fetal heartbeat. So it's only for those cases. If an ultrasound is performed, and only if, then the woman's offered the opportunity to view. But there's no requirement for any additional ultrasound to be performed by anything in this bill. So the suggestion that this bill might cause some level of additional intrusiveness in testing, it's factually not here. I think that might have been a misunderstanding of some members of the committee. Mr. Chairman, I've got some other. I think there's some other concerns that were raised by members of the committee. I don't know that it's best to address them at this point. I may just hold off till later in the discussion. But I did want to make that factual point to members of the committee. There's nothing in this bill that adds any additional testing in any context. It's only if an ultrasound is performed. This bill requires that a woman be given access to look at it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Sensler. Representative Levitas, and then Representative Mangan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Chairman Mills, I want to express to you in public what I've expressed to you in private, which is that I really applaud the way that you have sat before this committee for several hours, responded to our questions, done it in the spirit of dialogue, in a way that I truly respect. The exchange has been a meaningful one, and it's been a sincere one. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate that as a member of the committee. Whether we're on the same side of the issue or not, the dialogue should be respectful, and I really commend you for how you presented yourself and presented your legislation before the bill, before this committee. I just want to touch on two quick things, and just to clear up, I can only speak for myself as a member of the committee and not for the committee at large. I certainly do understand that your bill is not requiring ultrasound to be performed. My particular issue with it would be, and I don't know that you can really speak to this, would be, are you aware, or is anybody who is in support of your bill aware of any other medical procedure or code section or standard of care that would make the same requirement of any other type of practice? In other words, where if a sonogram and x-ray was taken, it is mandated that they must go through this litany of things. And I'm just going to let you reserve that answer because I want to follow up with one quick one that's related. how can you distinguish for me how this would be different than requiring? I've got a friend in the hospital who's now on a feeding tube right now, and her family is chosen to keep her alive. And I guess what I'm wondering is, how would we distinguish a case like this from a case where a family has made a decision to terminate the life? Would you be in favor of a legislation that mandates requiring that they've been offered the opportunity to keep this person alive on a feeding tube and they have declined? They've been given the opportunity to have other kinds of invasive procedure and go through a litany of those and make the family actively and expressly in writing decline those opportunities in the same way that we're asking this woman to actively decline the opportunities that you would present under the bill. I know that's a long question, but if you could, if you can comment on the first part, and if you could respond to the second part, I'd appreciate it. And thank you again.
I would. Thank you. And the reverse is true as well. I appreciate the respect that you have shown me during this dialogue. And I guess, first of all, I could not, in sincerity, respond to the medical. I am not, I'm just not an expert in the medical field, and I would be way out of my field of expertise for responding to that question. And then, second of all, I'm trying to remember what your second question was.
Well, I got into the same trouble with Representative Benfield the other day. I asked her a long, compound question. You can take the boy away from lawyering, but sometimes you can't take the lawyering out of the boy.
So I do remember it now.
Okay.
Okay. I really would not even want to respond to that, and let me tell you why. Because I think that sort of moves us away from the issue. And, I tell the banking committee, no disrespect to this committee, but I've been allowed to chair the banking committee, and I tell the banking committee, we're not voting on anybody who's speaking today. We're not voting on any material that's been put in our folders. We're voting on the words on the page on the bill. And so I'm going to try to stick to my own philosophy and try to keep my comments on the words on the page on this substitute bill. And it's not that I'm trying to avoid your line of questioning. I just really don't think it is substantive to this. I understand what you're saying in line with those line of questionings that we're asking her to do. I guess my response to that would be, who is going to hold the physician accountable if she doesn't sign off on that? We can't ask the nurse to. We can't ask the doctor to hold himself accountable. We can't ask the clinic, who the doctor may work for, to hold him accountable. So who are we going to ask to sign off on it if we don't ask? And so that's why I came back to asking the patient to sign off on these things.
And I would certainly respect your answer, and I guess what I'm failing to see is how that's different in terms of this bill from any other context where you would have a patient sign off. And again, we can agree to disagree, as you said.
I know the few times I've had to have a medical procedure, I feel like I'm at a closing. By the time I get through signing all those papers, that you can be paralyzed from the neck down, this procedure, and you're making sure that I can't, so right. I would say it's probably not any more invasive than that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for letting me ask a second round of questions. I appreciate it.
Representative Megan.
If you would do for me, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you would assist me in understanding the difference between, real briefly, the difference between the issues that were passed when this came before this committee last year, I believe, and this year. If there are any, I see there are a few differences, but if you would go, I'm sorry I was at another committee earlier. If you can go over that real, very, very briefly. And secondly, dealing with page 3, line 33, I would like to know the other types of ultrasounds, and are we basically saying are there other types of ultrasounds that are provided that this bill basically does not address? Those are just two before I do compounded questions. If you would assist me on that, please.
Sure. I'm going to go with the last one first, okay?
Okay.
The obstetric ultrasound. You know, I'm really okay with that. I just thought that we may be limiting ourselves, and I thought, why limit it to any type of ultrasound? I mean, it doesn't really matter to me whether you call it an obstetric ultrasound or whether it's, as long as if you perform some type of ultrasound, as long as you show that results or you offer the showing to the patient. That's what this bill does, and so that's why I was asking. Just, there's really no need for the word obstetric, I didn't think, as I thought upon it.
So is the word obstetric in or out at this point?
I'm asking the committee that it be out. It'll be up to the will of the committee, but I'm asking that it be taken out.
Okay. That kind of threw me off a moment ago, so I'm okay now. I was not here when you asked the committee to take it out.
The response to your first question is the difference. I think the main difference is this does not mandate an ultrasound. This does not make them do it, and it does not make them show it. If they do provide an ultrasound, what this does is it does mandate that they have to at least offer the viewing to the patient that they perform the ultrasound on. That's the gist of it. There are no penalties in here. There are no criminal penalties.
Okay. I was trying to get clear on that. Mr. Chairman, so one other follow-up.
Sure.
And you may not be the person to ask this, but I've asked this of some persons earlier today, and that is basically, it's a very elementary question, but I will go ahead and ask it, and that is, under what circumstances, ordinarily, not even thinking about an abortion, under what circumstances would a person secure an ultrasound, and under what circumstances would they ordinarily not have an ultrasound? Notwithstanding, just take out for the moment, take away the fact that an abortion is being performed. Under what circumstances ordinarily, and what percentages, if any, if you're aware of that?
Right.
Under what circumstances would an ultrasound be performed, and under what circumstances would an ultrasound not ordinarily be performed?
I'm not an expert in the medical field, but I can just touch on it generally. Ultrasounds are used for all kinds of things. They're used to find cysts, oftentimes, in a woman if she comes in complaining of pain. Sometimes they'll use an ultrasound and it will show a cyst. Ultrasounds are used to find things going on inside that can't be seen with the human eye, and they're used in a number of different situations. They're used to confirm a pregnancy. They're used to look at how the child is forming. They're used to look at, is the head up or is the head down? They're used to determine the probable gestational age, because it's the most technologically advanced system that we have, particularly in the first trimester, to tell that.
Would you say that 90% of all pregnancies undergo an ultrasound, or is there some lesser number, or is there some greater number? And then the second half of that question is, under what circumstances do they ordinarily not perform an ultrasound?
According to the guidelines for the obstetricians and gynecologists, their own little manual, and this is the most current one I have, and it says in the United States approximately 65% of all pregnant women have at least one ultrasound examination. Now, I read figures like you. I know that in this day and age, if I had access to an ultrasound, I certainly wouldn't counsel anybody not to get one. I would counsel them, you should do everything you can to find out what's going on inside of you so that you can make the best decisions for you and your family and your life.
The second half of that question really was trying to get there backwards, and that is, who are the 35% that do not obtain an ultrasound, and why, basically, if you have any data on that, and then maybe for someone else?
I don't have any data on that, but I would just say that, there are a lot of people who don't take care of themselves, who don't have access to not aware that they can get this done. Just, the same reason that some people don't do regular physical checkups. They just don't take care of themselves. But there would be a whole litany of reasons. I'm sure as many as we could think up in here.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Abrams.
Leaving aside for a moment my practice as a moonlighting obstetrician, can I turn your attention to Section 7?
Section 7.
I'm going to be a lawyer again for a second. It's on page 6.
We need to discuss some moonlighting
I may be in violation of the Composite Board of Medical Examiners, but I do have a concern about the language here, which is new language, and it says that the General Assembly may appoint one or more of its members to act in official capacity to intervene as a matter of right. That, to me, seems to circumvent the essential division of government that we have, that once this law is passed and once it is the hands of the executive branch, it is the prerogative of the Attorney General to take a stance if this is constitutionally challenged. This seems to me to create and carve out a very special right on the part of the General Assembly, and I find that deeply problematic, number one, because of cost. If we are indeed fighting this as a General Assembly, if we officially appoint one of our members, there's a fiscal implication to that. And in addition to that, there's the philosophical issue of the General Assembly having its own lawyers fighting possibly the Attorney General. And secondly, there's the fiscal implication of having attorneys spending time to fight when it is indeed the prerogative of the administrative branch of government, the executive branch of government, to exercise and to stand in the stead of the state if this act is challenged. Can you talk to me a little bit about why this is necessary and what the financial implications might be?
I'd be glad to, Representative Abrams. Let me address the financial implications first. First of all, I'd do it for free.
I'm sure
You'd appoint me, I wouldn't charge anybody a dime.
But you'd be in your official capacity.
What this language, where it came from, very good question. In the past, we have had decisions made from time to time on behalf of the Attorney General without the General Assembly sometimes being notified and being discussed about what was the intent of the legislature when this bill was passed into law. And any good attorney, I would think, kind of wants to know what the intent was sometimes. And oftentimes they will contact the Speaker or the Lieutenant Governor or the Governor and say, could you just tell me what the intent of this was before you passed it? And sometimes the intent is given and ignored sometimes. And so basically what this does is it just, this is not something I'm married or wed to. I just thought it was a good idea to throw in there, and that's why.
Would you be amenable? Because my concern is the language of official capacity to intervene means, in legal terms, it means that you actually become a party to the lawsuit. And as a party to the lawsuit in your official capacity, that would require legislative counsel or whichever counsel is engaged for this purpose to actually defend your position in a court of law as a separate party to the act. It's not simply being called upon for legislative intent. The other concern I have is that the state of Georgia does not recognize legislative intent as basically you can't introduce that as evidence to uphold or strike down a bill. We, as a matter of law, have said we don't believe in that. So what you intended to have happen is read on the plain face of the language. So I don't think that this actually gets there, and it does create for me a slippery slope, or I wouldn't say slippery slope because that's a terrible analogy, but it creates for me a very, very heartburn about creating a new prerogative for General Assembly members, and I would ask that language be removed.
I think you raise a fair question. I do also think that, Legislative Council upstairs is we pay them whether we're here or not. And so certainly I don't think there would be a fiscal... I don't think there would be a fiscal... And sometimes they come to your hometown and work for you in committee hearings. So anyway, I don't think there would be a large fiscal impact, but you certainly raise, and I would say to you that I would be more than happy just to remove that section if it would make you vote for the bill.
Almost had me there.
Almost had me good. I'm for the first part of that.
She's outside. Representative Beer.
I'm going to yield to Representative Lunsford, and believe he can frame the question that offers here to make sure she's better than I can.
Representative Lunsford, actually, I don't think you need any further introduction.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. Ms. Jill, if you could answer this question from Legislative Council's point of view, Ms. Jill, if you could. I think that what most people will find is it not common practice that the General Assembly, by a joint resolution, can appoint members to intervene on our behalf currently under Georgia law, and I believe we've done that in several instances, even recently, have we not?
This was something I was unfamiliar with, and not in my recent memory. We've done this. It's not unheard of. In Title IX, there's a code section that says that the General Assembly, in the intervention code section, it actually says that by statute you all can, or by act, you can do this. So this is not improper to be done, but just in my recent history, I haven't seen language like this.
Thank you so much. To answer Representative Abrams' question, Representative Abrams, it's a great question. However, General Assembly's been doing it for years. But it takes a joint resolution, the House and Senate both. As a matter of fact, in 1997, the House and Senate voted to pass a ban on partial birth abortion. And after the ban passed, there was a lawsuit filed. Thurber Baker, our Attorney General, represented the state of Georgia, and did an out-of-court settlement and met at that time with Mr. Murphy and Pierre Howard, who were the Lieutenant Governor. They appointed themselves to act on behalf of the House and Senate. They agreed with Thurber Baker and removed what the General Assembly had previously done in session and rewrote the law. And that was within the powers of their office, so it's nothing new in Georgia.
Who actually represents the General Assembly when we do that? Because Legislative Council is, by and large, not trial lawyers. So who steps in and...
Yeah, it's a great question. Normally speaking, I think a counsel is retained.
So there is a fiscal impact. We do have to hire outside counsel.
There very possibly could be if you hired them, but many times you may be actually testifying on behalf or in conjunction with the Attorney General, so in which case there would be no outside counsel. You're already using the Attorney General's office.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
No disrespect to my chairman or to Jill, but to the person I trust most as a lawyer, to see if the language in this bill, on the one main part of my concern on page 6 was, I'm sorry to the rest of you, but I was assured that it only meant that it could be referred to the committee, to the composite board, and they could then decide whether disciplinary actions were necessary or not. So that took care of one of my biggest fears. And to that, I'd like to move the question, Mr. Chairman. Can I motion? I move, or what I have to do? Move that we accept this. There we go. Okay. Forget it. Move, Lunsford.
All right. We've been on it a while. Any further questions? I recognize Representative Lunsford.
Chairman, I'd like to offer an amendment on page 4, line 5. And what I'd like to do is remove line 5, 6, 7 in their entirety, sir. And then also remove line 14 in its entirety, which would then simply state that the woman has the opportunity to view the ultrasound, but the 15 minutes of private reflection, which was something that Representative Levitas seemed to have a problem with a few months ago, was removed from the bill, sir. And I think I would like to defer to Representative Abrams, because she's probably the finest wordsmith in this room, if she would help me with that to be sure I got that correctly.
Absolutely. I've been here to hear what I was helping with. Thank you for confidence.
Can I answer?
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Can we add on just to make it a little bit clearer, on line 13 of that, whether or not she's elected to listen to feel heartbeat, if that was available, or however you say it on the sonogram, or,
It says if present.
Just trying to clarify, Ed, to what the person would be signing. Okay? Is there some way?
Let's go back.
Don't want to do it? Okay.
I think the posture. Do you have your wordsmithing down?
I'll be taking off 14 down there.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we do.
He's taking off 14.
Had a sidebar with Councilor Abrams. Representative Abrams, did you want to offer that amendment, or you want me
It's
to?
not present, she doesn't
Okay.
sign it.
Yeah, I'm fine if we take that out.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. On page 4, Mr. Chairman, line 5, remove line 5, 6, 7 in their entirety,
That's what I'm saying.
and remove line 14 in its entirety, and then on line 8, beginning with the letter C, renumber that to a B, or re-letter that to a B.
And then on line 12, would we not have to put an and after the semicolon?
Yes, sir.
John?
No?
And on line 4.
Yes, both of those.
And it's,
Does that take care of you, Representative Lunsford?
Yes, sir.
And then
Jill?
the
Representative Mills, are you okay with that, sir?
And the title.
Stacy, figure out me a way to do 13.
Okay.
Figure out a way to
And
13.
change the title accordingly. Okay, is that a motion?
Can I add on to it? Can I add on to it?
Can you add on to this
I'm
motion?
asking John, can we correct that one too, John, with that one?
I don't know if that's appropriate. You have to do separate
Okay.
motions, don't you?
Go ahead.
Is there a second to the Lunsford motion?
Yes, I
Got
second
a
it.
second, okay. All right. We'll take these one at a time. We have a motion by Representative Lunsford. I will try to repeat it. I hope I restate it correctly. But on page 4, on line 4, after the word community semicolon, add the word and. Strike lines 5, 6, and 7. On line 8, delete capital C at the beginning of the line and put capital B. On line 12, after the word sonogram semicolon, put the word and then and amend the title accordingly. Is that, Jill?
It's all I have to
Is
put
that
in the
technically
second.
a correct statement of the motion?
Yeah. Did you strike line 14?
I'm sorry, and strike line 14.
Strike the and on line 13.
Yeah, drop the and at the end of
No.
line 13 and then goes to the end of
Leave it
line
on.
12.
Mr. Chairman, I do see another technical issue
Yes.
on line
1, 2,
10,
3, 4, and 5.
which is described in subparagraphs A and B. I think would be,
Subparagraph A, right?
if that amendment were that.
Okay. Are we up, Jill, from a technical standpoint, are we okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There was a second. Okay, that's the Mumford, or I'm sorry, the Lunsford motion. Any discussion on the Lunsford motion?
I have one more.
Representative Sessions.
I'd just like to ask the author of the amendment what his purpose is from a public policy standpoint for taking away the opportunity for a woman to have 15 minutes of reflection on an issue that, again, deals with what is life in the womb, in which case, even in the 1976 case, Planned Parenthood versus Danforth, the Supreme Court says, and I quote, "is an important enough and stressful decision, and is desirable," and quote, using the Supreme Court's terms, "imperative that may be made with full knowledge of its nature and its consequences." Are we to assume that in an ultrasound performed, that one can fully contemplate upon viewing the image with full knowledge of its nature and consequences of this decision without giving someone even a cursory 15 minutes to make that decision?
Reverend Zeltzer, I appreciate your question. Actually, I think the woman's probably known for more than 15 minutes that she was pregnant. I think that she's known during the period while they're doing the ultrasound and during her viewing if she chooses to view it. I also think that the ultrasound machine is probably not going to be directly in the same room where she's going to have the abortion. The time is going to pass. I don't know if you've ever been to the doctor where they immediately come in and did an x-ray and set your bone immediately or did any other medical procedure immediately. I think there's ample time for her to reflect on it. So I just felt that it was a little bit too much for the woman that's in that position is already sitting there thinking about what's going on. She's already made the decision after viewing the ultrasound. They're not going to immediately say, okay, now it's time. So I just felt it was a little bit over the top.
If I could, just as a caution to the author, and I'm not presuming to have complete understanding of the author's intentions here, just that, with the momentum of a person checking into an abortion clinic, this time of reflection, their life and death decision, I think is important. I would just offer those in the committee to oppose the amendment.
Further discussion? Yes, Jim.
I think on line 10, opportunities should be singular because we took away paragraph.
Right. Okay. Thank you. If there's no objection from the author of the amendment will also include that change. Representative Lunsford. Further discussion on the Lunsford amendment. Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the amendment, please indicate by raising your right hand. All opposed? The amendment has been adopted. Did you wish to be recognized?
Yes, I did. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend line, well, I don't know what line it'll be, but it's now 13 on page 4. And it's on the one that says whether or not, just clarify, this is clarifying amendment, whether or not she is elected to listen to the fetal heartbeat, and then you would insert if present. All it means is if there was a heartbeat on the sonogram. If not, so.
Everyone understand the Cooper amendment? Is there a second to the Cooper amendment? Second. We have a motion that the Cooper amendment be adopted, which would insert the words on line 13 after the word heartbeat, the two words if any, and then a semicolon.
If present. If present.
I'm sorry, if present. Thank you. Any discussion, Chairman Franklin?
I was just curious as to the author of the bill's opinion of that.
I don't see a problem with that. I mean, whether she elected to listen to the fetal heartbeat if present.
Further questions or discussion on the motion? Chairman Knox.
If there's no fetal heartbeat, isn't there a problem here that besides the
No, they can't always hear it. If it's really early, they can't hear it on a sonogram. They can't pick it up.
Further discussion, further questions? The Cooper amendment. All in favor of adopting the Cooper amendment, please indicate by raising your right hands. All opposed? Cooper amendment has been adopted. Further questions? Councilman Justice?
I wanted to just inquire as the posture of the committee. I think someone made a motion to do pass.
No, we've done two amendments.
I'd like to be recognized to make a motion.
Okay.
Do pass.
You're recognized. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, the point of order, I made a motion at the appropriate time. I have further remarks.
I'll recognize.
Okay. I want
Not
to.
them.
Okay.
I want to get a second if there is going to be one. All right, we have a motion that House Bill 147 be given a due pass recommendation. Representative Lewis.
So, point of order. I was making a motion to pass in its current form. If it were further amended, would my recommendation do pass?
You want to withdraw your motion, and I can recognize Representative Lewis.
I'd like to withdraw my motion.
Okay. Any objection to withdrawing the motion? Hearing none. Representative Lewis.
This, Mr. Chairman, referred back to page 3, lines 35, 36. My amendment, I will say what it would do, then I will explain its purpose. I would strike shall, replace that with may. Strike be offered on that same line, replace that with request. After heartbeat and before the period, insert the following language, which opportunity shall then be given to the parent. So it would now read, the woman may, at the conclusion of the ultrasound, request the opportunity to view the fetal image and hear the heartbeat, which opportunity shall then be given to the woman, and then the rest is the purpose of this is if the woman wants to view it, it would mandate that an ultrasound's done and the woman wants to see it, the doctor has to, the medical facility has to provide that opportunity.
Does everyone understand the proposed motions? Representative Levitas, any questions? Representative Lunsford?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect to Representative Levitas, I think if we do that, we're back to where we are today, and we've done nothing but waste dozens of hours trying to accomplish a purpose we haven't accomplished. So I would ask that the committee oppose that amendment, sir.
There's not been a second, actually, at this point. We have a second. We have a motion by Representative Levitas. You've heard the discussion. Representative Lunsford, did you have something to add to that?
Yes, sir. I would ask that the committee vote down that amendment, and because I don't believe that it serves the purpose of the bill. To be honest with you, it becomes an opt-in instead of an opt-out, and the whole purpose is we're not sure that the facilities are allowing them to opt in today. And for the well-being of the mother and for what's going on, we're more concerned with her being absolutely sure that she had the opportunity to view it.
Mr. Chairman, may I be heard?
Yeah.
In this, and I certainly understand what Representative Lunsford is saying. I have yet to hear, other than one anecdote, any data to support the idea that across the board abortion clinics are denying women the opportunity to view requested sonograms or to listen to feel heartbeats. So, again, and I know I go back to this phrase, Chairman Mills, but I think this is a solution in search of a problem. And until we have a problem that we are really trying to solve, I would suggest this is the appropriate state for the law to be in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lunsford.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just submit to the committee to think very carefully about what we're doing. We've talked a lot today about standard of care for obstetrics and a number of different procedural or technical issues, but I think the real vital issue that's frankly inescapable here is the fundamental question that's being discussed is, what is the unborn? Is the child in utero a living, distinct, and whole human being that's a member of our human community? And if they were that, would be subject to protection, as would a child 2 weeks before birth, 2 weeks after birth, or 2 years after birth. That if we're dealing with living, distinct, whole human beings, and I would suggest that overwhelming scientific evidence suggests that. You might make philosophical arguments to the contrary, but scientifically you could make an overwhelming case of that. There's so much at stake here. To suggest that we would allow any margin for a woman to make an uninformed decision that has literally the life of a human being hanging in the balance, to me is so overwhelmingly important that to may and request and leaving room for a decision to be made in anything less than full information is to not do our job as a General Assembly. And our most fundamental role is to protect the fundamental rights of individuals. And these living, distinct, whole individuals are the ones we're seeking to protect. And I would submit, again, to the author of the amendment, with all due respect, and I know you believe this sincerely, I would suggest we're not fulfilling our role as a General Assembly. So I would, with Representative Lunsford, urge the committee to vote down the amendment.
Chairman Knox.
Call the question, Chairman.
Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had suggested a couple of changes be made to the bill as I walk through it. Do those need to be officially adopted? Were they kind of unofficially adopted as I presented the bill?
I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Excuse me.
On this amendment.
Yes. All right. All in favor of adopting the Levitas amendment, please indicate by raising your right hand. All in favor? All opposed? The ayes clearly have it. Leviticus amendment fails. And did you wish to be heard? I'm not sure we knew what your request was. Or I may have forgotten.
Okay, when I started going over the bill on page 2, on line 22, after the word abortion, strike the comma and insert the word or. And then after the word physician, the first physician listed on line 22, strike or by a referring physician.
So that would read then, yeah.
It would read, starting with line 22, abortion or by a qualified agent of a referring physician at least. And then I had a, you want me to? Okay, and then the next one was page 3, line 33. Strike the word obstetric, just to keep it uniform with the rest of the bill.
You've heard the request of the author who is not a member of this committee. Representative Collins.
I'll make those amendments. Make that as one amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a, I'm sorry.
Sorry. If the committee could look at page 3, line 7, that referring physician language is there again. If the intent is to take that out.
Would you
By the physician.
wish for your motion, Representative Collins, to include and make it consistent?
Yes.
Yeah. I would.
Okay. Now, I'm going to recognize for discussion. We have a motion that would encompass those 3 changes that the author has requested, and that motion has been seconded. First of all, is there any questions, just from a technical standpoint, about, does everyone understand the motion? Okay. Discussion. Representative Levis.
Mr. Chairman, I have a substitute motion. My substitute motion, I have no objections at all to the obstetric, removing that word. And so I would make a substitute motion to split this into 2 separate, I don't know procedurally how to do it, but essentially split it into 2 separate motions. Voting first on the referring physician language and then separately on the obstetric language. Well, I do have objections to the referring physician language. I have none to the obstetric, so I don't know how procedurally you want to do it, but that's my substitute motion.
Division of the question.
Division of the question.
Why don't we,
There's a motion.
yeah, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay. We have a substitute motion by Representative Levitas. Is there any question about it? Does everybody understand the Levitas motion?
I understand it.
If Chairman could.
Can we ask why?
Yeah, as I discussed.
Before we vote it down?
Sure. As I discussed, I just want, the only answer I heard, my original question to Chairman Mills was why we would be removing the referring physician from being able to comply with the statute as opposed to just, we're allowing an agent, but we're not allowing the referring physician. So I just want to allow the broadest possible scope to be able to comply with the section. And I don't understand why we're moving it. I just heard that there were some doctors, and I know Chairman Mills is in an awful position with that regard because he's not sure where it's coming from. So that's the purpose in dividing the question. Nobody has any dispute whatsoever with the obstetric, but I want a referring physician, if they are able to comply with the section, to be able to do it as well.
Okay. Any further discussion on the substitute motion?
As the author of the amendment asking to be divided, I speak strongly against this.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to be very, very clear of the ramifications of referring physicians. Unfortunately, I'm trying to catch a plane tonight, and I've been back and forth out of this meeting.
What time's your flight? You don't have to answer.
Anyway, the referring physician, I didn't really understand the issue on referring, and I apologize. But I know, Mr. Mills.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That just got to me. No offense.
Very difficult. In deference to my colleague, Mr. Levitas, can I understand just in one simple sentence why you want to exclude referring physician?
It came at the request of there's similar legislation traveling through the Senate. Similar. They dropped a bill pattern after mine. Okay. And this came up in their debate, as what I understand, and that physicians were more comfortable with that language being dropped. Is that correct, those that were in the Senate?
Fine.
I mean, I'm okay with leaving it in.
Okay.
I'm just trying to honor their request.
Further discussion on the Levitas motion. Hearing none, Vice Chairman Mills.
Just to make sure I understand, because I thought I did, and now I'm thinking I'm confused. The motion of Mr. Collins is to remove by a referring physician. The motion of Mr. Levitas is to vote on it separately?
Yeah.
The obstetric part and the referring physician.
Yeah, there's two things, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The intent of the Levitas amendment, which appears destined for the same fate as Levitas 1 amendment. The referring physician language appears twice, and then there's separate that has to do with a modifying adjective of obstetric before sonogram. I want to divide the question of the sonogram from the referring physician. There's nobody on the committee who views the obstetric as a problem, and there's at least one pesky member who's delaying folks from dinners and planes who objects to the referring physician language. That's right.
Okay.
I'm trying to get out of the windmill part here, okay?
So, I don't know if that clarifies it, Mr. Mumford. Sometimes my speaking makes it muddier than clear.
Further discussion. All in favor of the Levitas amendment, indicate by raising your right hand. All opposed? Levitas amendment failed to be adopted. Go back now to the Collins amendment. Any further discussion on the Collins amendment? All in favor of the Collins amendment, please indicate by raising your right hands. All opposed? Collins amendment has been adopted. Further, Representative Collins.
I'd like to be recognized for a motion. I make a motion to do pass as amended.
We have a motion.
By committee sub, I apologize.
House Bill 147 by committee sub as amended be given a due pass recommendation by this committee. And there has been a second. Any discussion on the motion? Chairman Frank.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Chairman Mills and want him especially to know how much I respect him and believe in his pure motives in bringing this bill forward, and what a champion for life that Chairman Mills is. But as I look at the bill and I see and I regret that I had voted originally for the woman's right to know for the main reason that after the woman is told all the information, she still gets to kill her baby. And I agree with Representative Setzler that we are dealing with a human life here. It is the paramount obligation of this body to protect that life. And I believe that anything that ends with and then you get to murder the baby is wrong. And with all the utmost respect for Chairman Mills, I will not be able to support the bill.
Further discussion on the motion. Further discussion. All in favor of the motion to give House Bill 147 a favorable recommendation to the Rules Committee by committee so as amended, please indicate by raising your right hand. All in favor? All opposed, same sign. The motion has been carried. That completes the work of the committee for today. Thank you, Representative. We will see the rest of the committee tomorrow.
Thank you.
3 p.m.
Thank you, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.